my fingers a little bit on the pulse as to like short range plans, if you will, but mostly trying to look out to long range plans. Different than someone in our office that processes and approves maybe building permits, or someone that works in our planning commission side that works on changes in applications. So separate from those two positions, what I do. Let's see if I can get this. Oh, perfect. So just a couple of things that Marissa shared with me you guys are interested in. So we'll try and hit on those specifically. Obviously, we want to focus on West Hawaii and things that you guys are working with, understanding sort of the resort node, how that is impacting vacation rentals, talk about the land use changes that are being proposed, roads that are being proposed, and then how we're sort of addressing housing. So I haven't had a whole lot of time to address all those things in this agenda, but we're going to jump into the actual document and explore those things with you guys. So real quick, I'm going to flow through a lot of this information. Back one. So the purpose of the general plan is to set forth this long range policy. What do we want to look like as a county, as an island, 25 years, 50 years from now? What are the things that we know we need to address? But in a practical, more plain speak, it's sort of a strategic plan. It gives us the vision, and then it gives us the tools to guide our decisions towards that. And so you'll see that the general plan is used to make decisions around growth, around development. It's used to make decisions around public investment. Where are the roads that we're putting in? Where do we need parks? Any public investment you can think of. And also it gets into some of our programming. What are the programs that we need as a county to achieve whatever the vision is? It's not any of these specific things. So it's very broad, it's very general. It's meant to be sort of the holder of the vision. And then as it gets implemented down to building permits even on the ground, that implement this bigger vision. Just another way of understanding it, we have a lot of planning documents in our county. Anything from a CDP, you guys might have heard of the CDPs. We have plans regarding our water use development plan. You guys might have heard of that, which really looks at how much water we have and where are we planning to utilize that water. All of that has to be consistent with this plan. So it's very important that this plan actually represents where collectively we want to be in the next 25 years. That's why we need you guys input. Okay. The scope is very broad. It covers everything you can think of, especially as on an island. It covers all of our health and safety needs. It covers our recreation needs. Obviously housing, which is a big component that you guys work and help us with, infrastructure considerations, and of course our land use decisions that we make. We started this process, well, before I get to that, we have a very early land use history for Hawaii. I don't know if you guys are from here or how long you've been here, but we have this like really, it hasn't been going on for very long. Our first general plan was created in 1971 after we created our county charter, which is like our constitution for the county. So that first general plan was in 1971, and it's been updated twice since then. So you can imagine that there's a lot that's changed since then. And also of note to you guys is most of our large subdivisions were actually created prior to statehood, which means prior to any general plan, prior to any zoning, prior to any kind of guidance, or so we end up with these crazy subdivisions that are out in the middle of nowhere with no infrastructure and really weren't planned to be that way. So you guys know that very well. Oh, okay.
On the other side.
So the process to do the update, we started in 2015 for this process, and we basically sent out a letter and a notification saying, hey, we're gonna start this process. We welcome any input you have at this initial stage. And so we got comments from general public, we got comments from our county council at the time, saying these are the issues that need to be addressed in this plan. And so we took that input into phase 2, which is kind of reflecting on that and starting to come up with our goals and our strategies. Phase 3 in 2019, we came out with an initial draft and did some public outreach on that draft to get some feedback. And then since then, we've been working through that feedback. So we're here now, phase 5. We released this recommended draft in September, and it's out on the web, and make sure you guys have access to it. But we're doing engagement to meet with folks, get them interested, get them understanding what we're doing so that you can provide us feedback again, because without that feedback, it's only going to be as good as, we can make it with the feedback that we get. So really want to encourage people to participate in any way that we can.
Where on the web do review?
It is on cohplanning.conveo, that's KONBEIO.com. And happy to provide, I think there's a QR code in the presentation actually that you can just scan and get right to the site. After this part, we will be taking in the feedback, and then it goes through the adoption process before the planning commissions and ultimately the county council for approval. Sorry.
Okay.
This draft is really grounded in a lot of the work that the communities already did through their community development plans to work on community values, community vision, community objectives. And so we took that information and synthesized it into one sort of comprehensive vision statement. Then we looked at, further into this idea of sustainability, which is certainly not new to Hawaii Island, but trying to understand the best practices about how do you make a plan address sustainability. And one of the things that we're working on is you can't talk about housing without talking about infrastructure, and you can't talk about infrastructure without talking about land use. So really making sure that those things are talking to each other and are consistent to each other so that we actually have a vision rather than one piece doing one thing and one piece doing another. So that's really the work that we've been doing through this draft. And then just high level, it has the vision and goals, objectives, guidelines, down to the policies and actions to address implementation. This is sort of the structure of the plan. So on the left of this graphic, you'll see the chapters that we have. And then on the right, you'll see all the contents or the sections within those chapters. And just want to point out that the Sustainable Development and Resilient Communities chapter is, probably for you folks, the most important chapter to spend time on. It contains housing, it contains all of our infrastructure, and it contains land use. So it really looks at, again, in 25 years, what do we need for those things to address? Here's a QR code. If you want to get to that platform, you can scan it and save it for later, or you can do it during my presentation. No big deal. So this platform is new to us. We're using it to gather feedback because it's a really interactive website. In 2019, when we did this the first time, we got almost 4,000 handwritten comments that we needed to manually go in and enter into spreadsheets, sort, do all the things, so that was a lot. So this captures all the comments in one place, and we can generate reports and do things very easily. And it's also really fun and interesting to see, you can see other people's comments. So it's very open and transparent. You can see if Nancy's provided any comments, you can see Nancy's comments. And maybe you agree with them or you have something to add, you can even interact with those comments as long as it's obviously appropriate. for the internet to have on there. But anyway, that's the platform. Sorry.
No, it's not you.
Okay, I actually want to go into Conveo and let's look at some of the components that we talked about, land use, housing, and some of the mapping. So if we can share Janice's screen, she can help us to do that. Perfect. So this view here is the mapping system, and you can get there through a variety of ways inside the document, which I'll let you folks explore. When you're on here, I just encourage everybody to just hit all the buttons and see what they do. That's the best way to get to know something, and also I challenge us to try and break it, because I'm telling our developer, like, hey, this is gonna be, you know, a heavy hit, so let's try and generate that. So let's go into maybe the housing section. You can navigate, there's a table of contents that's really easy to navigate. There's a sort of a variety of ways, again, to access. And there's all kinds of YouTube tutorials at this point on our YouTube channel if you want to learn more about that. So you'll see as you navigate, each chapter is sort of set up with an introduction, and then it gets into the challenges and opportunities, which is really sort of the state of affairs for that particular subject. And then it flows through goals, objectives, policies, and actions. So we can get into the goals, at least we'll start there. So I encourage you folks to read into the narrative a little bit, because it does provide a context for what we're trying to address. But as you guys very well know, we need more housing units on the island to accommodate the need. And so that's really what the narrative talks about, is just the housing deficit, certainly a lot of the missing middle of not having enough duplexes and townhouse styles to accommodate. We just have a lot of single family residents, which doesn't fit everybody's. So our housing goal, you can read that there, and this is a place where if you wanted to make a comment, you can just hover over that and you'll see the plus, and you can hit that and you can provide your comment. So really simple, straightforward, and we want to hear from you folks in the industry that really know this material well. So you'll see underneath the housing goal, we have several objectives about, you know, sort of the things we're trying to accomplish. This one in particular is about increasing our housing units in general. And then we have some more specific ones around maintaining our housing stock that we have.
Is there any, you know, not having read through this, is there any thought given to like senior co-housing?
Yes, so there's a lot inside this. You'll see this one, well, sort of applicable. There's a lot of places where we're talking about innovative and experimental housing. So we know from experience that there, you know, there's, and you guys know also from the industry, whether you call it an Ohana unit or a mother-in-law quarters or a micro unit, or there's lots of different ways that we provide housing other than the detached single family dwelling that we've kind of done historically. So we're really pushing in here to be innovative and to find those other housing solutions. That of course is going to require us to look at our codes to make sure that we can actually permit those housing units, right? So you'll see as you scroll down, maybe just scroll down to the actions, you're probably going to see things about amending codes to allow for that flexibility. So again, we recognize if you're going to be innovative, it means that we got to make sure that our codes are also innovative to allow for things to be permitted. So that's a big effort in this housing section. And then this affordable housing character guidelines might not impact you folks so much, but it's really about those larger affordable housing developments and the type of elements that we like to see in those communities so that they can be complete communities and not just sort of housing units out on their own without any additional support or resources. So any questions about sort of what you've seen so far?
When you said about the communities, what kind of amenities? Just a park or?
Yeah, so this
shopping center?
this one points to some of those. And again, this would be sort of things that would need to be addressed on site. But a big part of our plan is also making sure that we have residential units available where there are jobs in close proximity, where there are education facilities, where there is access to transportation. Like that's the kind of developments that we want to see rather than the stuff that happened before we became a state where we have these communities really segregated from all of those services and they have to get in a car and sometimes for several hours commuting to their jobs and their schools, right? So we're trying to address that, we've proposed some centers actually in those communities to allow for multifamily residential, to allow for some commercial activity, so that again, we could at least be providing some level of service for those communities, not having to make them travel to go get a gallon of milk, for example. Yeah, Nancy.
When, aloha, aloha.
TOD principles into the general plan that you pulled out of the policy. Also in the vision for TOD development, would it also include an affordable housing feature within TOD visions? Because you wouldn't want TODs to just be market rate or expensive housing. You'd want that mix not only in use, but also the type of people who live there.
Definitely. I don't know that that's specifically addressed off the top of my head, so I welcome your feedback on that because I agree with you.
Transit-oriented development, and they want to keep the circles of transit-oriented development.
So maybe we can.
Bubbles.
One other thing I want to hit on is the resort node, so that you can go to the resort section, and then we can go into the maps and explore that a little bit.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me by chance? Can you hear me by chance?
Question on that, as far as rezoning to say residential multiple or residential.
Yes, Marianne, I can hear you.
Living, is that kind of in your scope of possibility and relativity?
So, as we were talking about before we started, like what is this plan used for? It's used for rezone applications. And so when we get into the map, you're gonna see where we've suggested places for higher density urban. And so if you're within one of those places, and this gets approved, of course, to change your zone, we would say, hey, that's consistent with where we want higher density, and we recommend approval of that. Change of zone goes before the planning commission, and then finally the county council for approval. But at least from the planning department and planning director, we would say, yeah, it's consistent with the general plan, so we want this to be approved. So it does guide those decisions, but it doesn't do it automatically. It still would require that landowner to go through that process. And there are some things in our plan about expediting that process, because anybody who's gone through that, it can take, quite a bit of time. It can take quite a bit of resources, tied up in different, consultants in order to get you through that. And so we're suggesting that if it's consistent and if it's a place where we want to be, how can we as the county then support this and act more like partners rather than sort of watching people try and go through the process. Sorry, you had a couple questions. What else?
The second one I had was going to be as far as more in that commercial space, height restriction developments. That's kind of an issue with office space, with rising prices, and it's not really a hard time staying in. And I know it's a popular desire and request, at least from what I hear, to have height restrictions higher, the equivalent with the bike tolls. And that area, I know it was currently started from food, but any on that?
Sure, so that is very specific and it's part of the zoning code. The general plan doesn't, unless there are some high level overarching things we talk about height, it really doesn't get into the height restrictions. That's in our code. However, we are also updating our zoning code as the next part of this process. And so if you have feedback about that, we can take it here and we can translate it into that process. But that's where it would have to be addressed, is at the zoning code, not in the general plan for that specific.
There's one more question.
Perfect. Marianne?
Yes, the one thing I love is when people in the audience are asking a question, either
Go
have
ahead,
them
you're
come up.
unmuted.
Oh, sorry. Over here.
You're speaking, we can't hear you.
She is muted.
She's muted herself, yeah.
How about now? I'm unmuted. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Do you have a question, Marianne?
Yes.
Can you guys
Can you
hear me?
Can you hear me?
This is Gretchen. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
They can't hear us.
Sorry. Try
So
again.
can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Marianne.
Okay. When somebody in the audience is asking a question, would you have them repeat the question? Because all we hear is the answer to a question that was muted or we couldn't understand. The people on Zoom, at least that's what I'm experiencing. I just wanted to ask if you'd repeat the question.
Okay, happy to do that.
Thank you.
Gretchen have something?
She's probably gonna tell us that Marianne was muted.
Okay, yeah.
No, I was just trying to tell you, Marianne and I both couldn't talk.
So would you like to tell them go back and talk about what the transient nodes are
Sure.
and how those are applicable, what Nancy was asking, repeat Nancy's question again? And then
Yes,
we'll maybe
I can try and summarize.
Yeah.
So Nancy was asking about our transit-oriented developments, which are within this plan, and those are really the centers where we want to be providing that mixed use, higher multifamily residential, commercial activity. And so we have centers around the island where we want that kind of higher density use happening. And Nancy was asking if affordable housing is a component of those transit-oriented developments. And so I suggested that, I can't remember specifically, but if she can go in and provide that comment, that would be helpful. And then gentleman was asking specific questions about how change of zones are addressed using the general plan, and also about height restrictions. So a change of zone gets compared to the adopted general plan. And so we would look to the map, and let's say this plan were adopted as is, and you propose to change your zoning from a single family residential to a multifamily residential, and you are within the area that we designated for a higher density urban, we would most likely bring forward a positive recommendation on that change of zone. So that's sort of how the general plan gets used on a application basis to make sure that things are being consistent. And then the other question was about height restrictions and if there's opportunities for changing those to accommodate some of the office spaces and more units there. And my response, I think you've heard that, was basically that's part of our zoning code and would be required to be included in the zoning code, which we are also in the process of updating. Okay, does that work, Marianne?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, jumping into the resort section of our plan, I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. And so I know you folks are very familiar with probably our STVR rules around vacation rentals, certainly here on the west side and in the work that you guys do. And so we've been using that information to guide how we've been mapping those resort nodes in here. And also if you go to the table about the resort types, that's another useful place to look at. I think it's in the resort.
This isn't the urban.
Yeah, I think it's in the,
Yeah, it's at the
at the end, yeah. So as you guys can see, there's a lot of information that you're more than welcome to go jump into and read for yourselves. So these resort area character guidelines really guide, like, when we say resort, what are we talking about? And so you'll see that we have major resort areas, intermediate resort areas, minor, and then retreat areas. And so this is, I think, the opportunity for making sure that we're in alignment as far as where we want those transient vacation rentals happening. And so we've mapped these all as resort node. So I think the only thing that's not mapped currently is the retreat resort areas, because those tend to be more like your bed and breakfasts out next to some amenity, maybe the volcano or some beautiful place. So those aren't mapped as resorts. The other ones are. So as far as the vacation rentals are concerned, they would be in each of those major, intermediate, and minor areas. And we can explore the map and sort of see where those are for West Side. So the resort is that really bright, vivid magenta color that you see there. So I think Kohana Iki is the area here that we've mapped for that resort designation. And maybe if you can just kind of pan around.
Nothing along Lake Drive.
Yes, we do have along the Leahy Drive. So this is the Kuhio area there, and then maybe head south and see what the Leahy Drive looks like. So we have that pocket along the Leahy Drive there. And then farther south into Keaho, we have another area. So I know that they are working on revisions to that bill, and I'm not sure if you guys are tracking on the TAR, hoping that you're providing input and feedbacks. But that's at least, so that process is gonna happen, frankly, before this plan gets adopted. But we're more than happy to hear your comments that you're sharing there here too, if you're seeing something that doesn't quite fit right for that, for your community.
It looks like the resort node boundaries are about the same as the health bed. Is that accurate?
We can explore that. There's a tool on here that we added yesterday. Oh, repeat the question. Have there basically, is there any changes, or is it mostly what is already the existing general plan resort areas? And so we have both of those as a layer. You just have to turn on the other loop peg to make it work. Yeah. And then click that. And then there's a toolbar here where you can swipe and see the changes.
So it looks like that part's about the same.
So that part's the same, yep. Especially if we're looking at just the purple, that's easy to keep an eye on. Yep, that's the same as well. I think Kohana Iki is different. Yeah, Kohana Iki is different. Oh, sorry, if you go back south a little bit, Janice.
I live in a condo in Campo, and the people in my building are always complaining because we have so many vacation rentals. We're in a resort now, so I have to educate them what that means.
Yeah, so in this tool, you're gonna see some of these bubbles popping up. You can go and make comments on the map. If you're seeing a place that maybe we did change that shouldn't be, or we did change, whatever the information is, you guys can go and add that information in here as well. And so again, these maps are used for future decisions around land use and infrastructure.
Can you look at Waikoloa and see if
Sure.
things change there?
So they don't take away anybody's zoning rights. They don't change a subdivision. They only impact when someone comes in with a change of zone or another big development application where we can say, hey, this is what our plan is for and you need to be consistent with that. So if someone is already having a use that's inconsistent, we can't go and take their rights away. So that's a big distinction. Sometimes people get this map confused with zoning. Zoning addresses permitted uses. What can I do on that property? This guides future development decisions.
So how did you come up with these decisions? What informed your decision making as to what size?
Yeah, so there's a lot of information and analysis that went into this, depending on which part of the island you are in. We did rely on our community development plans for the information they already gathered and was already approved. We also relied on existing projects that are sort of in the pipeline that we know are coming, and also looking at our population and economic forecasts of where people are going, so that we know we need to accommodate whatever XY population is coming into a community.
I assume that it's working somewhat. Wastewater and other water issues that are developing, being worked on.
Yeah, so the previous question, sorry, I didn't repeat that, was how did we come up with this map? What's the information that went into the analysis? And as I mentioned, we relied on a number of places of community development plans, projects that were already in the pipeline as far as part of the approval process, and our population forecasts and economic forecasts. And then the second question was, how is wastewater and water capacity considered in this as well? And so we did work with our Department of Water Supply and Environmental Management. Environmental Management, as you know, we don't have a lot of sewer on our island. I know that's something that they're working to address, but certainly in this area, it relies on a private system. So and they have lots of capacity. They've shared with us that they have lots of capacity. I don't have a specific number on that, and we can ask them more information, but so yes, those things have been considered as far as water and wastewater. But also, because this is meant to guide future decisions, it's also meant to prioritize those infrastructure projects. Where do we need more water? Where do we need more wastewater? All right, I didn't even see you behind that pole. And same with our roads projects. So like, hey, we're gonna have a denser population here. We need to address some of the connectivity issues.
Is the criteria that led to these shapes, is that included in the general plan? So like if the
Yes.
landowner feels left out, that you drew the line on them.
Perfect.
Go back and appeal or.
Yeah, so these maps, right now, they look like they're pretty bound to property lines. I don't know if you can see the gray is sort of the property lines underneath. That's because that's an easy tool for us to use to map. They are not intended to be parcel specific. They are intended to be broad and flexible. And so, yeah, if someone were to come in this little corner, sorry, nobody can see me pointing, and try to develop, a little bit more density, the director could look at that and say, well, that's close enough, and that the intent is to, make sure that we have our density in this area. And so we could, the director could make that decision. So it's meant to be broad, not boundary specific necessarily.
Is that explicitly stated in there?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, and again, just keeping in mind, it's not a zoning map.
Yeah.
It is the future land use map, so it's, it is meant to be broad, visionary kind of a thing, versus very specific of you're either commercial or you're residential, and here's what you can do. Yeah. Let's explore the roads real quick. I know that was a question. I hope someone's monitoring time. I'm not monitoring time.
You're fine.
Okay. Let me know when I'm done. And then Dennis, if you can click on the base map and the streets map, I find that to be the most useful for this. It's in the, no, it's in the base map. Let's see. So, also demonstrating this project, again, you guys can go in and explore, but there's a lot of ways to interact with this and see information. So for Kona, thankfully, your community development plan did a lot of work on road connectivity. And so we're able to bring that in, as well as any other current proposed projects to make this map. So to explore it, it's a lot, obviously, because we need a lot of connectivity in this community. So if you click on it, you'll be able to see sort of what are all these lines, what do they mean, and where do they come from. So this one was a new road project, and the source was the Kona Community Development Plan. And I think also the legend on the side, you'll see red are the new roads, blue are the extensions, green is improved, and then orange is widen. And we did consult with our Department of Public Works and also the State Department of Transportation on their projects when we were creating this map. So I think the bigger question for this community is about funding, frankly, because we have a lot of need as far as the road connectivity, and we only have so much dollars to stretch. And so it is about, if you guys can give guidance or suggestions on some prioritization, I think that is useful. We've done that a little bit with our mapping, just, where we have higher density urban, obviously we're gonna focus infrastructure needs to accommodate that. But then, some of these larger connectors, we kind of are gonna continue to need you guys' input on what works. Is this still a valid project for everybody? We still need it. And then how do we prioritize it so that we can find the funding and move forward? So this is the same, you can go in and, Janice, if you can just show them real quick how to make a comment. So on the left-hand side, you'll see all these buttons, and if you go to share your thoughts, and you're clicked on a thing, you can hit that blue box there and be directed to the place where you can provide your comment. And then it'll show up as a pin, again, that everybody can see, because we're trying to be, open, transparent, but also when you see other people's comments, it tends to make you think, oh, I didn't even think about that, or that's crazy, or whatever your reaction might be. And then this information all gets submitted to the back end of our office. Your email address, your name, none of that's provided on this map. Just your comment would show up. So, and also there's a place where you can drop files. Again, that's for our staff to see. So if you have a picture or a plot plan or something, like, hey, I need you to look at this thing, you can drop it here. Have that access as well. But when you're in the map, you only see what the narrative is that people provide in their comments.
Can you?
You can click on one just to kind of see what that looks like. So this one is looking at, looks like some higher density, perfect area for condos and apartments, working class people. So again, someone was saying, hey, we need more density here. So that's just, good information for us to have.
Can you show us areas that are identified that will be zoned for things like duplexes or condos or townhomes? Because we were talking about.
Sure, yeah, so let's go to the land use.
Having zoning changes so that we could have some
on this
different types of products.
On this map, I do not have the zoning layer. That's something that we could add if you guys requested and need it to do your review and analysis. Like I said, we just added a feature yesterday based on some of the feedback that we're getting, so we can tweak this to make it work for people. So we welcome that kind of input. And then if you open the legend, you can see that too. So tends to be that darker red color is our higher density urban places, and then the color scheme kind of goes softer from there. And then if you want to understand what do you mean when you say high density urban? You can click on a feature in that high density urban. And it'll tell you a couple things. And then it'll tell you high density urban. It'll tell you if it was revised from the existing plan. Like, is this a proposed change or is this staying the same? And in this case, it was revised. We need to correct that. It's a good, we're sort of testing out different things in this. So it looks like it was revised because the LUPAG is showing industrial in this space here. So then if you go back into that first button on the side, it'll say Conveo link. And then click back on the high density urban. And you'll see that blue box says high density urban now. Click to learn more. And that will take you into the document where you can understand what's the definition of high density urban, how many units are we talking, what are the characteristics around there. So it's meant, again, to be interactive. And so it provides a summary of, what does that mean? And then if you scroll down, it'll provide you the actual page number where you can go click on that to visit it in the document.
It's awesome.
Yeah, it's
So-
pretty
So a lot of
handy.
times what realtors are asked when you see a piece of vacant land is what would be done there in the future?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, can you indicate to how everyone should go to this and look at it and how they would view that? If
Right,
they were asking themselves that question.
So again, I just want to continue to hit that zoning is what says what you can do there off the bat. But sometimes people have a bigger vision, right? And they want to make changes and they want to do something different. That's where this document would come into play again. So they want to make a change to that. They want to do something different. Then we look to this plan and say, hey, whatever you're doing, it's either consistent with our vision of what we're trying to address, or it's not consistent, and therefore that's the wrong place for that type of use. So again, zoning, you have your rights, you have your entitlements, you have your permitted uses, but if you want to do something different, we look to this general plan to understand
So
where we want to go with
it
that.
would tell the person whether they were likely to see someone get a positive
Exactly,
response
exactly.
to density there, or a
Exactly.
negative response from the
Exactly.
planning department.
Yep, exactly. So, did we break it, Dennis?
Oh, no.
Did it take it to us,
didn't take us.
to the high density
I
urban?
didn't click on page 33 though.
Yeah, try go to wherever that was, sorry. I think the map, you might be able to just click back on the map and, oh, you closed it out. Just so that you guys can see where we're talking about the urban designations and what those actually mean and look like.
How influential is this in the budget process we talked about earlier?
Yeah, so that roads layer, for example, right, we know we have a high need. And so this plan actually prioritizes our investment. So if things come in and, oh, we need a park over here, well, we're gonna look to this plan and say, where did we say we needed parks for the next 25 years? And that's how our budget decisions are gonna be made, versus sort of the one-offs that can come up that might not be consistent with the vision we're trying to address. So there's capital budgets, which deal with our parks, our roads, sewer, water. And then there's our operating budget, which is actually what pays our staff or provides some of the programs. And so both of those budget considerations have to be consistent with this plan and the vision in it. So there's a lot of places, let's go to housing, for an example, where we're talking about trying to create more education and training programs for our residential, affordable residential units, and in places where we have affordable units. So we would look at like, what are some programs we could put in place to provide that service? Okay, so real quick, just want to get back to this, sorry, the demonstration about the high density urban, because I think this is important for you folks to understand. So if you click on one of the page numbers here, you can navigate to the actual area and the document that talks about this high density urban. And you just hit that jump to page that sort of shows up. You can read it there, but then you can actually just jump to the page in the document. And I'm trying to find that table, Janice. Maybe that was the wrong page to jump to. You can also get to from the table of contents if we need to.
Maybe read it.
Oh yeah, it's just up from this. So we also have the maps inside the document, but they're not as easy to navigate, frankly. Okay, so this table provides all of those colors on the map with what do we actually, what does that mean? So it provides you with a description, it provides you with what our optimal residential density is, like what are we aiming for there? And then the possible zoning designations that match with that. Our current plan doesn't do that, so that's been a little bit of a kind of a gray area of like, what is consistent with, high density urban? What kinds of zoning can I actually put in place? So we put it in the plan so you guys can see that and be able to walk through it. So if you scroll up to the top, Janice, that's where we have our urban. So you can see then that high density urban, that darker red color there is really the place where we want that multifamily, commercial spaces in our urban centers. And you'll see the density, that 36 to 60 units per acre. And then again, the possible zoning designations that match that.
Is there any information about flood zones?
Flood zone information is used, and again, how we navigate, I'm sorry, this is not about the document, but it is. So if you go to search, you can actually ask questions in this. So, how are flood zones considered? And this will go through the document, provide you a summary of that answer, and also point you to the places in the plan where that exists. So it's part of our land use policy as it relates to floodplains, high surf, tsunami hazard areas. There's some hazard mitigation strategies in here. And then again, even, of course, lots of wildfire. For anybody that's tracking on that, please go test this out because we've been really trying to focus on what our wildfire policies are that we need to put in place so that we can protect ourselves.
So this map being good, so you have a client who's looking to develop their land or for ideas of how to develop their land. Would this map be a good resource to call upon when filing for, say, a rezoning ordinance?
Absolutely. So just to clarify where we are in the process, this is not adopted.
Yes.
Okay, this is proposed and we need the feedback, but the current general plan, which is a 2005 general plan, has maps that are the same, would be the same use to clients that are looking, hey, what can we do in this area? If we look at it the same way, it's just that the map might not be reflective of the vision we're trying to achieve now. It's the vision that we were trying to achieve in 2005, which, might not address everything currently. So that's why we're doing this update. But in either case, this map is used, yes, to say like, what does our island need to look like in 25 years?
So in response to that, is there any summary or Cliff Notes version as to 2005 versus direction we're going now? As opposed to having to filter through the entire process, then look through the other and see
Sure,
what's missing.
there's not at this time,
Okay.
but we have heard some of that,
Really
feedback.
enormously helpful. Like it's just a general sense of direction.
Sure.
If there are particular things that we know or haven't.
So the question was if there's a version that we can understand the changes that are proposed between 2005 and this proposed plan here. And so like I mentioned, we don't have that now, but that is some feedback that we are hearing from folks.
So, but when we're on the website, that
map where you were showing us like Waipuloa, and then you move the cursor across,
Yes.
so we can see before and after. That could give us some idea.
Absolutely.
too, by
That
putting it
will
from
show you the
before and
map.
after.
That will not
Right.
show you the policies
Right.
and the language changes.
Right.
Criteria, why this decision was made, or just kind of just, yeah.
Sure.
Sure.
In terms of capital improvements, does this plan give provide recommendations for advisory? So that when we have elected, we put this together, we can help them in terms of what priority one perspective based on recommendations.
Right. So the question is, does the plan provide priorities for our capital budget and for our decision makers? And so I would look to our implementation section that's in here that talks about priorities and also phasing, understanding that we can't accomplish everything, at one time. This really is a long-range plan. So what do we need to do in the first 5 years, 10 years, 15 years? And then I think too, some of that prioritization is about the criteria, frankly. We don't have a list of projects at this point that we would, be able to provide that, but we do have the criteria in here about what should the priorities be. So I would just encourage folks to kind of come in here and explore that as well. I think it was at the next page up that you scrolled through. This list of funding source, it just kind of goes on from there. So page 208 in the document will.
How big is the document?
How big is it? 213 pages. It's much smaller, frankly, than our 2005, because there's a lot of narrative that, the narrative always gets stale when you do these documents. It's like, as of today, here's what the issues are, but then 15 years from now, the issues are different. So we tried to limit the narrative as much as possible and just get right to the point of
What
things.
date are you taking input? To what date do they need to go in?
Perfect.
To put the input in?
Yeah, so we're open now until November 20th for comments. Again, there's been some feedback from community that we need a longer time. So our planning director is hearing that and, may make a decision based on that type of feedback. But right now it's November 20th.
How long do you think to get through this?
How long will it take to get through phase 5 and 6? That's the adoption process. I'm optimistic, so first, keep that in mind, that I come at things from an optimistic point of view. But based on the feedback that we're getting so far and some of the adjustments that might need to be made, they're not horrendous, which means we can do them fairly quickly. So after November 20th, after the comment period ends, we take in those considerations. We make some suggested, improvements. That package goes before the planning commissions, Leeward separate from Windward, and they will hold public hearings on that plan. They'll welcome public to testify. They'll make their own recommendations. They could have separate recommendations from Windward to Leeward. That's just part of the process. And then that package all goes to the county council. So we're hopeful that we can get to the planning commission in spring. How long they take to hold their hearings and get through that, I'm gonna say 3 months. Again, I'm being optimistic. So right then, potentially we could get to council summer or fall of next year.
Is it accurate to say that really district-specific infrastructure, whether it's a road or a trail or even solid waste treatment or something, that isn't really the purpose of this plan, that those specific projects in a region are more of a CDP issue?
That's a good question. So Nancy's question is about a very specific community needs and infrastructure, and if that's appropriate here or if it's appropriate at a smaller level like the community development plans. And I would say the answer is both of those at this point. There are some connectors that are important regionally and island-wide that need to be addressed. And then there are some very specific things that we could tweak. We could put in a stoplight, we could put in those are, down at a level that's not where the general plan is speaking to. So that is something that could be worked through with the community development plans. That's something that could be worked through with your county council members. It kind of depends on, what the specific infrastructure is, but this is supposed to be an island-wide plan, so we try to keep the infrastructure components at that island-wide scale, rather than very niche community needs.
Like major collectors would go through this.
Exactly.
As compared to a very local road.
Exactly. Now you'll see though that in our current transportation maps, because the Kona CDP did all that mapping, we included it all. So maybe that feedback is some of those roads can come out because they are very, again, specific to that particular neighborhood rather than a bigger.
Tell them how to find the community development plans.
How to find the development plans. You can go to our planning website, County of Hawaii Planning, and then there is a button that's General Plan and Community Development Plans, where you can access all of our existing general plan and all of our existing community development plans. And there's also a body of volunteer community members that serve as the Community Development Plan Action Committee. Nancy is one. Thank you for serving, Nancy. And they hold sort of regular meetings in their communities to address things that might be at that community development plan scale.
Is it accurate to say that probably after the general plan ultimately gets approved, we'll start doing CDP updates?
Yes, and you'll find, so the question, sorry, I'm not doing a very good job of that. Question was sort of basically, when are we gonna do the updates to the community development plans? And I think that is in phase 1. I think that's in phase 1 of the implementation of this proposed plan to look at those. Oh, it's in phase 2. So phase 1 is sort of organizing the process and making sure that we're good, and then phase 2 is the updates.
Can you see if we have any questions in the chat box?
No question.
So do we have any other questions from Zoom or from the room?
So I think it's just comment period and QR code, things there, yeah. Okay, if you do have questions, you can use the platform to contact us, or you can email generalplan@hawaiicounty.gov, and that will go to our general plan team, and we can answer any questions.
Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, that was great.
That really was.
Is that the end of your
So
meeting?
well, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
You were